Hi guys, hello, welcome or welcome back to my channel. My name is Alice and I am a 32-year-old printmaker, and I have actually been doing really good at going through my hard drive and actually editing and uploading all the videos that are rotting on there. But I've decided to take a brief intermission today and film another one. This is actually a video I've been wanting to film for a really long time, and I feel like now is the right time for me to film it. Exciting news, in September I'm going to be starting a master's in printmaking. I have really been wanting to make this video because one thing that I love about relief printmaking, especially Linocut printmaking, is how accessible it is and how cheap it is that you can just like get going. I think it's so accessible. You can do it on, you know, a desk in your bedroom or your kitchen table. The stuff doesn't have to be that expensive. A lot of stuff you can use that you probably already have in your home anyway. And for me, like, one of the things that why I want to talk about my Linocut journey online is because I want to encourage other people to give it a go. For me, I wanted to make this video kind of a video of two halves. I want to share like a beginner's guide of what you need to start just printing, but also I want to share with you the other extra stuff that you don't necessarily need. As I said, one of the things that I love about it is that it's so accessible. But all that to say, I also want to share that, you know, in 5 years, what I use and how I use tools has changed. And so I want to share that experience with you and share, like, I guess, like an intermediate home printer sort of list of stuff that I would recommend and how I use it. A couple of months ago, I taught a Linocut workshop, so that really took me back to that like first time trying it out properly. I did do Linocuts a couple of times in art school, but really this is a self-taught endeavor for me. And so it's really something that I want to share. If you are already an experienced printmaker, I still would watch the first part of it just because there may be something that you hadn't thought of. But if you do want to skip to see kind of what I use now, what's changed, and what other extra things I use to supplement my creative practice, skip to this time here. And they're not necessarily expensive either. Some of the stuff is pretty cheap, but I do think really makes a difference once you've got to grips with the medium. Anyway, without further ado, let's talk about the stuff that you actually need. So I've had a good think about this, and I think there are only 6 things that you need to create lino cuts. First of all, a piece of lino, some ink, somewhere to put the ink, a roller, cutting tools, a Baren to burnish your print, and something to print it on. It really is that little. You know, you don't need a special tray. You can use, you know, an old photo frame or a dinner plate. You don't need to buy a Baren. You can use a wooden spoon. But I do want to elaborate on what I do think would be best if you're just starting this out, and talk a little bit about each bit and why I think it's important. So let's start with lino surfaces, shall we? I have 5 different types of lino here, and they kind of all serve different purposes. But what my suggestion would be, if you are starting out, try as many as possible. You know, they are a consumable of this practice, but they're relatively cheap. I say that this is probably the most expensive one, the speedball speedy carve, and I'm not crazy on it, to be honest with you, but I know that because I've tried it. Obviously I'm giving you what I would use, but I think, you know, trying it out and having fun and having a play with a new process is part of why you fall in love with the process. So I reckon try them all out. So stuff like the speedball, speedy carve, and then this here is the Essdee Pro, is quite flimsy. It's quite thick. There's pros and cons to all of them. So with these, I kind of put these in a similar boat, really. What's great about them is because they're thicker, if you wanted to do a reduction print, that would be easier because there's more depth to work with. They're also quite squishy, which means that they're easier to carve than some other types of lino. So particularly if you're new to it, maybe you're finding other linos harder on your hands, they could be a easier, more accessible option. But what you trade for that, I feel, is detail. As I mentioned, I did run a workshop a couple of months ago, a beginner's workshop. They used the FlexiCut by Essdee. Again, this is a slightly more rigid, but it is still easier to carve. I think easier for beginners, but sort of think the more that you go into the practice, you can't get as much detail as you might like with this, I don't think. Next up, you would have Japanese vinyl, which is typically either a dark grey or this sort of two-toned. What's great about this actually is because, which is different to all the other linos really, is that you can see where you've carved with this, which is really cool. So as I mentioned, you can get it as like a dark grey. This has that dark grey in the middle, but the surface is either blue or green, which means that you can see what you've carved and see what the print's going to look like easier. Sometimes you have to kind of use your imagination a little bit. Whereas with this, it's very clear what you have or have not done, which is positive. It is a little bit more rigid, which means you can get a little bit more of that detail in it. A lot of people see this kind of as like the happy medium of them all, with these three initially being like quite squishy, but quite user-friendly. This being, I guess, like a little bit more of a step up. Although my favourite is just traditional linoleum. So with this, you can get the most detail, and it's 100% compostable. So traditional linoleum is made out of linseed oil, so you're not just like carving into plastic. But also, as I said, you can get the most detail out of it, and that's because it's quite stiff, which means it is harder to carve, which, you know, if you're looking at like an A6 size like this, like, okay, fine. But if you're doing like an A3 piece, like that does really work your hands. So depending on how used to the medium and sort of carving you are, that can put a strain on your hands. But this one's my favourite. Even though it will take you a little bit longer to carve, I think it produces the best results for me personally. But all that to say, I have all of these 5 on hand. Depending on the project, will depend on what I use. It depends on the size, you know, what mood I'm in. Next up, let's talk about how to carve. So actually, when I first started doing Linocut printing back in 2020, I bought a Essdee kit, which you can get at Hobbycraft, Cass Arts, Jackson Arts, usually on sale, not for the RRP. I would actually personally recommend that. Like, it's got a lot of this stuff in it. And for a while, I would continue to buy those kits because they were on sale and everything was at a good price. So a lot of this stuff is from that, but you can also buy a lot of this stuff separately too. But it's worthwhile. This is what it looks like. This is also from Essdee, which I think is quite nifty. So you've got a handle which goes into a Baren, and then it has the heads that you screw on to make the cutting tool. So it's a great way to keep it all together, and you can also use this as a Baren to burnish your prints as well. Let me just put it together so you can see what I mean. Ta-da! So you can buy this cutting set separately without all, I guess, like the extra bit, but I think personally, I don't think it's that much more expensive to have this bit, and then it's something that you can burnish the prints with, keep it all together. And also, I think actually most importantly, if you get like the set that's separate, you don't get the safety head for the cutting tool. And actually, I think this is great. It's kind of like a V with like really, really long bits around the outside, which means that you're pushing, because how you're going into the lino, it doesn't matter how hard or soft that you're pushing, relatively speaking, you're going to get a consistent line in the lino, which I think is actually, particularly when you're starting out, really handy, rather than just going for like one of the really, really big ones and then skipping off or like cutting too much off. You're able to get a really nice consistent line with this. You know, whilst you are playing with this medium to begin with, figuring out how much pressure you need. Again, if you're changing linos as well, there are variables. This is just like a really good one-stop shop size gauge. All that to say, even though you can use this as a Baren, you can use a wooden spoon as a Baren if you wanted to, I would recommend getting yourself a bamboo Baren. They're not that expensive. The surface area is quite big. When you're initially first burnishing prints, you know, this has a smaller surface area. And this is also like a little bit softer, so you're like less likely to rip the print or move the paper away from the lino to smudge it. You know, I think these are like £3 and I think they're worth it. Even at this like earlier stage, just again for the surface area, you get to do the print quicker. So if you want to do a bigger edition, you're not getting as tired. This is really a tactile process, so you really put your back into it. And also I just think they're fun. Like, they're nice. You can get some really, really expensive Barens, but I still love a good bamboo. Next up, let's talk about rollers. So this is, I think, like the most typical Essdee roller. As I said, this is one that comes with the kit. But rollers come in all shapes and sizes, in different hardness and softnesses. With rollers, you want them to, as you can see, personally have a range of sizes. Depending on the details, and if you're doing like a jigsaw print, having bigger or smaller ones depending on the project can be really helpful, because I think particularly if you're working with water-based inks, if you're doing something really, really big and you have a really small roller, this might start drying out before you have the opportunity to put the paper on top. So these trays I still use to this day. This is again from the Essdee kit. As you can see, I had yellow on this one. But as I said, dinner plate, old frame, mirror, whatever, a flat surface, so you're able to roller the ink out. Yeah, I mean, you could even use like, I don't know, a bit of like a cardboard or something, but basically you want the ink to be evenly coated on the roller so it can then evenly coat the lino. So having a flat surface is preferable than having like a ridged surface or like an uneven surface. Means that when you're rolling, it's going to skip over it, which just means when you get it to the lino, you may under ink up some parts or over ink up other parts, so you would get a less consistent print. And lastly, out of those 6 things that are non-negotiable is paper. I would recommend having a cheaper paper stock, whether it's a sketchbook. Hang on, I got one out to show you. I would recommend like a ring binder sketchbook, even if it's like slightly cheaper paper. You get more of it, but you're able to rip it out, so you're not having to worry about the bind. So obviously if you had a sketchbook where it was like glued together, I think that you could obviously cut the paper out if you wanted to, or if it's like a flip pad that's on the cheaper side, fine. Just so I think having something a little bit cheaper that you don't mind doing a couple of test prints to make sure that you're happy with your composition or the colours that you're choosing, rather than like going through any more expensive paper, I think is the way to go. But also getting a nice paper stock for your prints. I think, you know, these are £5.50 from Cassarts. These are A5. I really like this paper. It's 200 GSM. I've also got some Clairefontaine paper, which is 250, which I really like as well. But I also, at this stage, would also recommend rice paper. So you get rice paper in rolls, typically. I don't know if you're going to be able to see so much in this video with me holding it up. It's really thin. I think rice paper can be between 60 and 100 GSM usually, but this paper is made for printmaking in mind. And why I think it's great even at a beginner's stage to use is, first of all, you can cut it at any shape that you like because it comes in rolls, it's not pre-cut paper, but also because of its thinness, you can see what's going on underneath. Like as soon as you put it on an inked up piece of lino, you can see through the paper, which might sound a bit bad, but actually it means that you can get lots of really nice detail. And also, as I said, you can see what's going on. So when you are hand burnishing prints, you can see how hard or soft that you need to go. If there's any areas of great detail, you're able to push a little bit more into those areas, and it just kind of gives you a window into what's happening under the paper, because obviously when you go to more heavyweight paper, you can't see through it when you're printing, and so you don't always necessarily what's going on. It's all a bit of a gamble until you're doing your peel and reveal. All of these different things are variables, right? So how hard you need to press on rice paper is different to how hard you need to press on 250 GSM paper. But all that to say, I still think it's a really great way for you to be able to practice your technique and see how the burnishing process works. As I said, it's kind of like almost like you're peering behind the curtain and able to see what's going on. And also I think it's got a really nice texture to it, rice paper. I think it looks really nice and complements printmaking really well. So there's a couple more things that I think really, even at a beginner's stage, would benefit your practice. And one thing is a safe surface to cut on, particularly when you're new to printmaking. I mean, still even to this day, I sometimes accidentally cut into the table, but it doesn't have to be expensive. So these are like cork placemats, which you can get. I think I got these from Dunelm in a set of 4. Like £5, like really, really inexpensive. And also you can just get yourself like a cutting mat. This one's A4 obviously, but depending on the space or what you have, obviously this can then go nice and neatly back into a drawer, and it's like one of those like self-healing ones. So that I would really recommend. And there's also a couple just like general pencil case bits that I think would be really beneficial. Metal ruler, really, really handy. If you want to cut straight lines, you can rest your tool right next to it. And so that can really like help you cut any straight lines that you want to. Something to put your design onto the lino with would be handy. What I will say is with lino, you can rub out marks on it, but you can't do it too many times. So that's, I guess, like a con of using lino is that rubbing out, like the erasers don't really work very well on it. So that is something to note. But also, obviously you can use a pen. So quick pit stop on this pen. This is a Staedtler Lumicolor permanent pen. And why I think this is a pen I would recommend is because it is permanent. So say you want to make a reduction lino cut, or you want to make maybe changes on it. If you need to like wash your lino off or get rid of any ink off of your lino for whatever reason and still want to be able to see your pen marks, this is really, really good. You can also get, and also depending on the colour of your lino, with the like dark grey Japanese lino, that's going to be harder to see. But you can also get permanent pencils. These are also by Staedtler. I've got one in white and one in red. Those you may not have around, but are worth knowing about. I mean, I feel like it goes without saying, scissors, whether you're cutting paper, whether you want to cut a bit of the lino off, more often than not, if I've got a piece of lino and I want some negative space, I will cut around it with a cutting tool and then just get some scissors in there and get rid. Another thing that I do use all the time is washi tape, specifically washi tape, not just because it's cute, but because of its like tackiness. If you wanted to almost make like a jig, so you putting your paper and your lino in the same place every time, marking stuff out with washi tape is great. It doesn't ruin the paper typically. I mean, with maybe rice paper it would. With higher GSMs, it doesn't ruin the paper, but still sticks. If you need to obviously stick anything down, whether it's the lino, whether it's a piece of paper, if you want to use it to mark things like on your surface that you're printing, as in like the table, not the paper, just really handy. I use washi tape all the time and it just comes in handy. Another thing actually that comes in handy that I don't have with me, and it's in the other room, is glue dots. Hobbycraft do these like glue dots. I use them all the time. Again, it can be interchangeable with the washi tape depending on what I need it for, but super duper handy. So that is everything that I would say is a non-negotiable, like a beginner's entry level into printmaking. You know, 5 years into this, let me share with you the other things that have worked their way into my creative practice that I think are fantastic. So first of all, we're going to talk about tabs and pegs, which look a little bit something like this and this. So hang on, let me get one out the back so you can see. So you know I mentioned washi tape, right? This is where washi tape really comes into its own. If you're doing a 2-layered print and you need to keep an eye on your registration, you can of course make a jig, but taping up and using registration tabs is really, really a great way to do that. So what you do with these is they come in a pack of 2. Is you stick these down in the same place and then you prep all of your paper by sticking them to this, and then when you're ready to print, plonk this on the top, off it comes. Really, really inexpensive, but, and a bit more time consuming, I would say, but it really makes such a difference if you're looking for precise registration. And whilst I am somebody that loves to see that something has been done by hand, and that also means, you know, you're not a computer, and whoever is looking at your prints, I'm sure you want to convey that you are not a computer. I still think obviously you want to have it as precise as possible, and that's a really easy way to achieve that. Whilst talking about printing, a printing press is something that I've invested in. I've not brought it out for you here today, it's heavy. I personally have an A3 press. Mine is made by Pookie Presses, which are actually based in the Southwest, which is great. Fun fact, when I was my first time at Bath Christmas Market, I was making Christmas cards and my wrists were killing me. So I drove to the Forest of Dean to buy one. I was like, I can't wait for you to ship this to me. I'm coming right now. And they facilitated that. So big up Pookie Presses for dealing with me being like, please help. I need this now. But yeah, I would recommend a manual press. I would love, I guess this is like, maybe I should leave this to the end, stuff that I would love to have is a like rotary press where you go like this and like that. That's even better. But for now, my Pookie Press works great. So other additions, I would say, again, they don't necessarily have to be expensive, is a bookbinding bone. Why I think these are great is because when you think of like bookbinding, right, obviously this is made to be used with paper. So it's sharp enough to like get a point and to score paper, but you're not, like, unless you're doing it right with the point, you're not there to rip the paper, right? Which is important. If you have a print that has a lot of fine detail and you know where it is when you've got the lino down, whether you're using rice paper or a thicker paper, if you do a couple of test prints and you're like, this detail consistently isn't getting pushed, whether you're using a bigger press or hand burnishing it, this is when I get this bad boy out, and I will just use the side of this and use that on that specific bit just to make sure that the lino and the paper will make contact with one another. And there are so many other things that this just comes in handy, but I would always, again, opt for getting specifically a bookbinder as opposed to, I don't know, maybe like a pottery tool, which looks similar, which could work. But obviously, because this is made to be used with paper, and I think that's why it works so well to continue using it in this process. Another thing, which is maybe a bit strange that I add, cornstarch. So as I mentioned with the Japanese lino, that's two-toned. With that, you can see where you've carved. And what is great about specifically cornstarch, because of how finely milled it is, if you've come to the end of your carving process and you're like, right, okay, I'm ready to print this, particularly depending if you change your inks from water to oil-based, which I'll talk about next, and you want to be able to see what the print is going to look like without actually printing it, putting cornstarch into the relief area is a fantastic way to see what the print's going to look like, because it fills in all the gaps. And typically I'm printing on white or off-white paper, so that even the colour works great, so I'm able to kind of really envisage what the print is going to look like. You don't have to get the lino wet to get rid of it. I just use like a brush and brush it off. I think if you did it with something like, I don't know, like normal flour, that would be a bit more like, is less finely milled, so that would have more of a lasting effect on the surface. But I've used it on a bunch of different types of lino and it's worked great. Other tools that I would suggest is a palette knife. Again, this is something that you might already have hanging around, but I for a long time wasn't mixing colours, I was just using colours out of the tube. If you've got really finicky parts of prints, I bought myself like a modelling set of tweezers, and they have come in handy so many times. I did a jigsaw print for a client, and there were some bits which I literally was like putting in, it was like operation, and I would not have been able to get the precise results that I wanted if I didn't have these. I also have in here literally a pair of nail scissors. Where are they? Here they are. Sorry, I'm throwing them everywhere. I've also got literally a pair of nail scissors. Get yourself a lino nail kit. It really comes in handy. Like having like a small precise thing of scissors can also work great. I also love nail clippers as well. I have no idea where my nail clippers have gone, and the reason why I love nail clippers for printing is if you're carving and you're like, shit, I'm about to go so like too far, and if you were to use a cutting tool, you probably would have to like taper it out. You can just nail clip the ends off, so it will be like a blunt end, but you will lose less than if you were using a tool. Literally get yourself a Linocut nail kit. Honestly, I have used it more times than I'd care to admit. There's a couple of the extras that I want to talk about before I show you the stuff that I've upgraded. So another one which could be super duper simple is tracing paper. Funnily enough, when I was doing the workshop, that is definitely the thing that was missing, because people were like, oh, how am I supposed to get to the lino, the drawing that I've just done? And I'm like, draw it again. But I appreciate that people want it to be as perfect as possible, and that's another reason why Bamboo Baren comes in handy, because if you do some tracing with some pencil, you can then flip it over and rub it onto the lino. That's something I've done loads as well, and then I'll go over with that permanent pen and start carving from there. But another thing you can also use is transfer paper. So again, depending on if you're going from like a separate drawing, and then you can put this in between, so it's double-sided, and this blue, if you run over it, I don't know if you're going to be able to see, maybe from this side, you can see a design that I've done there. That's another way for you to sort of get like an outline onto your lino before you start carving it. I actually find an Apple pencil works really well to transfer anything, because obviously you're going to have like a piece of paper on top that you're looking at, then the transfer paper underneath, so having something with a really like precise nib without ripping anything. I recommend Apple Pencil for that. Using it for its analog purposes, not digital, is funny to me, but worthwhile. So one thing I have changed in my practice from when I first started is the type of ink that I use. I now use oil-based inks. I just think the finish is better, and I find it's typically more clean. When I'm printing a larger edition, I find that this bleeds less than water-based inks, and whilst I really do believe that you should start with water-based inks, I think it comes to a point where you want to move on to oils. I personally use the Cranfield Safe Wash Relief inks. I currently am based in my house. I don't want to clog up my drains. I'm really trying to keep as much goo out of the waterways as possible for my personal benefit of not having to call a plumber, but also for the greater good. So this is where I've landed rather than going for full-blown oils, although these are oil-based inks. What I love about Cranfield is they print the labels on the front, so this is like actually dried ink. They also mix really well. I would really recommend this brand. They're also a UK-based brand, but what comes with that is cleaning. So as I said, with the water-based inks, they are really easy to clean up. But with the oil-based ones, they're harder to clean up. I have this on hand. This is Clean Spirit by Bartolene. Again, having sponges and stuff that you don't mind getting dirty and covered, like stained with ink, is the way to go. I mean, sometimes what I'll do is I will take, you know, when your dish sponges are starting to look a bit scuddy, I'll take those and then they'll become print sponges. Oh, I also, have a scraper as well. What's great with those Safe Wash inks is you could let them dry out completely and then put a bit of hot water and then scrape it off. I find it's easier to let it dry and then try and remove it. As I said, I use literally one of these, as you can see. That's the best way I find to clean up. I have also upgraded some of my rollers. Now I do use the Essdee ones all the time still. Oh my god, I forget the name of this brand, but as you can see, they've been well loved. But also I think having a range is really important. Those two are my smallest and my biggest rollers respectively. I find having a small one, obviously for smaller details, is really paramount. If you're trying to blend two colours together, so you have like a gradient in the middle, also having something that can kind of go in between those two is really handy. But I predominantly use this one for details, but I use it all the time. And then conversely, if I'm trying to do like a really big print, like if I'm doing something that's like even A4, if I'm doing an A4 print and it's like predominantly one colour, I'm using this. This is also great to help mix colours together if you're taking two different tubes of colours and making your own. This is like having bigger rollers just makes that easier to do. Lastly, I wanted to talk about cutting tools. So I have this dot tool, which I got from Hands Printed. And what's great about this is obviously with like traditional Linocut tools, you're kind of going in a straight line. So you'd be getting a small dash if you're lucky, whereas this you kind of stick in and like flick up so you can have like more dots. So it's a great way to get specific texture. It's actually quite expensive. I think it was like 20 quid, but I do use it. And I have also upgraded my cutting tools. Let me open these for you. So these cutting tools are by Power Grip. The one thing I will say about the Essdee tools, the only negative, whilst again I still use them and I still think they're great, is you can't sharpen them. So they do have a specific lifespan, each of the heads, whereas these type of tools you can sharpen. Now that is actually something I haven't done. I know on Hand Printed, which is a website that I frequent, they have a sharpening compound and system, but they use leather and I'm vegan, so I don't know how I feel about that. I need to do a little bit more research on what else I could use instead of using leather to sharpen these alongside the sharpening compound. But that just means that you're going to have these tools for longer, so they are like a little bit more of an investment, but you can have them for years and years and years if you look after them well. So and I have noticed that just anyway they are sharper than the Essdee tools, which obviously can be a con if you're brand new, you don't want to chop your finger off. Thank you ever so much for watching this. I hope you've been able to take something new from this today. I'm gonna go now, but I hope you have a great day. And subscribe if you haven't. It's free. As I said, I'm starting a master's, so there's going to be so much printing goo on this channel. Just you wait. All right, lovers, I shall see you again soon. Bye.